Hey, how y'all doing? I'm not going to keep you long today. This should take about 15 or 20 minutes, and we really just want to bring some attention to House Bill 280, which expanded the Georgia campus carry law, the firearm laws. A lot of people have some concerns. We're not really here to argue the merits of the legislation as it was passed. We're here to talk about how we're going to live with the legislation and the things that we need to do to keep you out of legal situations and on the right side of the law. So a lot of people don't realize, but you've always been able to carry firearms on this campus, just in limited manners. A lot of people that have carry permits were always doing so in their cars, and they left them locked, and that was appropriate under the law, but it has been expanded. Actually, the governor signed it into legislation on May 4th, and it went into effect on July the 1st, so it's in effect now. And I would like to say that at this time, we've had no complaints, we've had no problems. And I think we've probably had less than 2 or 3 inquiries as to carrying them. And that's from students who walked in our lobby and wanted to know more about the law. I don't think that this is going to be something that we've heard is going to be a problem. I just don't see it being the problem that everybody is fearing. I'm not saying that we won't have issues where people aren't educated or don't understand, and that's going to be part of our job to make sure that this message gets out in a clear and consistent manner, just like we did back 2 years ago when they allowed them to start placing it in the vehicles. So the USG put out this PowerPoint, and we kind of tweaked a little bit to meet some of our goals and objectives today. This is certainly a sign that we normally wouldn't be used to seeing around a campus. But they are allowed to carry. The important thing on this whole presentation is to understand you have to have the permit to be able to carry. So this law applies to people who have the gun permits. If you don't have a permit, it's always been illegal, and it still is. So this is only for permit holders where these provisions have changed that expand what they can do. Also, it only applies to handguns. So no long guns, no shotguns, you know, weird missile launchers or all these other things that people are picturing. It's just handguns, obviously something that can be concealed. If you want to get into the definition of the law, it's actually defined here: carried in such a fashion that does not actively solicit the attention of others and is not prominently, openly, and intentionally displayed except for purposes of self-defense or the self or others. So I have to have the gun covered. It has to be concealed. It can't be an open carry weapon like you see police officers carry it displayed. It's got to be put away in a fashion where they're not trying to show you the weapon. So for example, if I had it in my coat like I do today, you can, you know, if you're sitting there, you can see a gun on my side if I open my coat. But ordinarily, if my coat was shut, you wouldn't see it, right? And that would meet the provisions of the law. Now, if I were to bend over and my coat come back open, or I'm walking down the sidewalk and a gust of wind blows my coat open and you happen to see it, does that put me in violation of the law? It would not put me in violation because, again, I'm not intentionally trying to do that. So I'm trying to meet the letter of the law. You got to use common sense on this. When we talk about permits, you have to remember Georgia's not the only state that issues carry permits. Other states do as well, and all these have reciprocating laws where they recognize our permits and we recognize theirs. So if we come into contact with someone from another state and we reciprocate with that state, then they can have their weapon here just as well as any Georgia resident. And the funny thing about other states is they have different regulations and rules, just like Georgia. So some states have 18-year-olds that can carry weapons, and they can legally do so. And because Georgia reciprocates, if they're on that campus, this campus or one of our campuses in the USG, they can legally carry that weapon. And I think you'll see over time, you see how many states have added just in the last few years. One of the real holdouts was South Carolina. And now that we're over that obstacle, I think you're going to see more and more. You're just going to see almost all of them added at some point. Where are license holders allowed to carry on campus? Well, they're allowed to carry concealed handguns again in any building or real property owned or leased to the USG institutions, and we do have exceptions. We're going to talk about the exceptions. OCGA, or the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, 1611-127.1. This is the code. If you want to write it down, this gives all the explanations of Georgia firearms laws. It goes into a lot more depth than what we're going to cover today, and it tells you what you can and can't do. It's got some interesting reading. But open carry is the handgun must be carried open such as in a holster or outside of the clothing, and that's prohibited for anyone on campus except for law enforcement. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll expand. Concealed carry, which is what's going to be concerning the permit holders, is defined as carrying in such a fashion does not actively solicit the attention of others. It's not openly and intentionally displayed. It's substantially covered by an article of clothing or carried in a bag of nondescript nature. So you're going to have people that carry concealed in a whole bunch of different manners. Somebody may have a leg holster with it hidden there. They may have it on their belt like I'm doing. They may have a shirt bloused over the weapon. They may have it in a handbag. They may have it in a purse. So as long as it's concealed, like the law is stating here, it's okay. One thing that's important is the person does have to maintain physical control of the weapon at all times. So if you're carrying it in a handbag or a book sack or something of that nature, you can't leave it across the room or hanging up. We had one instructor asked us about the possibility of the handbags being placed on a hook when they come in. A lot of people like to hang up their book bags and then go to their desk. That would be an issue because at that time, that person doesn't have control of that handgun. So we really have to educate our students and our faculty and staff as well. If you have a gun on you, that's a really huge responsibility. You go to the restroom, you know, maybe in the past you hung your purse on the hook or something. Now it's even more important that you keep everything within hand's reach because you're responsible for everything that comes out of that weapon or anything associated with it. And you see here at the bottom, I just kind of highlighted they all must be carried concealed. Here are a couple of options to let you look at. Not allowed on MGA campuses. That's not the cowboy, by the way. That's the pistol. We're just saying you can't. We like cowboys. So he can't carry it in these outside manners that you see, like I said, most law enforcement. And then, as we just spoke about, that are allowed, you know, maybe this guy's got a shoulder holster or something, and maybe she's carrying it in this bag, or maybe she's got it, you know, under her shirt, blouse somehow, or even in her shopping bag. I don't know. So a lot of different varieties. The prohibited areas on campus. These are the locations on campus where weapons licensed are not allowed to carry concealed handguns on property owned or leased by the institution or USG properties. So again, we go back to our OCGA 1611-127-1 that outlines the exemptions of this. And the only exemptions are police officers, active military, judges, and then you have a whole host of other type of law enforcement like probation, parole. I saw a DNR ranger on campus today. All those type of things would be fine. The places that we cannot carry the weapons, intercollegiate athletic sporting facilities. So the weapons carry license holders are not allowed to carry in buildings or property used for athletic sporting events. And I'll give you a couple examples for this campus in just a moment. Specifically, stadiums, gymnasiums, and similar facilities where the intercollegiate games are conducted. And that's the key word there is intercollegiate. That's what makes it or breaks it. We're not talking about intramural. We're not talking about rec. We're talking about true recognized intercollegiate sports. And this exemption applies to all facilities at all times, not only when the event buildings are closed or conducted. So to give an example would be the gym in the community education center. Even if that building's closed or we're not using it for an intercollegiate game that day, you cannot have a firearm anywhere in that building, regardless. So even if there's not an event going on, you can't have it in there at any time. I added this one, even though this doesn't specifically address us because we don't have a lot of tailgate, and I hope we have that problem at some point in the future, but, you know, get people out, spectators. But because a lot of you do attend events at other campuses, or, you know, maybe you have friends, somebody may come up and ask you what in regard to this law, just so you'll know. Tailgating areas where fans may congregate outside of the sporting facility, there's no prohibition there. They can have their gun on if they like. And student recreation centers and similar facilities that are not used for intercollegiate games. So what would be an example of this one on the Macon campus here on the bottom? That'd be the Wellness Center. I mean, we have sporting events go on in there, but there's nothing that's categorized as intercollegiate, so they could. The tailgating thing, a lot of people got worked up about that when this passed, but if you think about it, the law already allowed them to bring it onto the campus in their vehicle. It was already in the vehicle, so technically they could have been tailgating and have it right there legally in the vehicle. So this maybe just expands it to the ability to them to wear it on their side or to have it on them while they're, you know, tailgating, but when they go into the game, they're still going to have to take the weapon off and secure it. So there's not that much difference. Some examples of intercollegiate sporting facilities, and the reason I say examples and I don't say this is where we draw the line is because this is fluid. It could change, right? So these are currently what we deal with. In the Cochran campus, we have Morris Gym, Neesmith Field, Stuckey Field, and Knights Field. And here on the Macon campus, we had the volleyball gym that we've already spoke about, as well as the Georgia Premier Cross Country course, the long distance track. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's across the Ivy on the new property, and that would include that whole property. It wouldn't be sections of that property, it's the whole thing. Now, residence halls, fraternities, and sorority houses are another place that are prohibited. They're not allowed to carry in student housing facilities, including residence halls or fraternities and sorority houses, on property owned or leased by the institution, such as the lofts that we have downtown. It does not include fraternity and sorority houses or property that's not owned by the institution or by the USG. A lot of people, Georgia Southern is a good example. You have Fraternity Row, it's policed by the university police. Well, they wouldn't allow you to have guns on that property, but let's say we're at UGA and the fraternity or the sorority was off campus and owned independently by that fraternal organization. They would be allowed if that charter of that fraternity or sorority allowed it. A lot of fraternities and sororities don't allow it anyway, so it's not really going to be an issue there. Residence halls, they're prohibited. So again, let's say they've got it in their car. Hopefully they're doing it by the letter of the law. It's locked, it's secured. When they get out of their car, it would have to stay locked in that vehicle. They cannot carry it into their residence hall. Can they have it in the parking lot wearing it, walking through? Yes, they can. That's not the way it's been defined by USG Legal, is that it's the physical structure of the building. So in the parking lot and around the way, that would be permitted. This is another area that doesn't necessarily apply to us, but some of you may know children that attend universities that do have daycare facilities located on them. Georgia Southern's another good example. They have one. I think there's 3 or 4 now in the system that do. And you can't have weapons in the preschool areas. And they also have to have the electronic mechanism when you come to the door where they check you and they screen you. If they don't have that mechanism, it doesn't fall under this definition. So a lot of them that weren't up to this standard have now, is my understanding, such time met that standard and added those. That also includes, or does not include, hallways, common lobby areas, spaces adjacent to the preschool, or outside spaces. You know, if it's a playground and it's fenced, then obviously you couldn't wear a weapon in there. But if it's just an open area, again, that's around that school and you're walking through, then you would be able to wear your weapon around that. Currently, we do not have any areas that meet the preschool or child care space definition. Something that's came up since this legislation, a lot of people ask, well, what about camps? You know, we have a lot of camps on campus. What about field trips? You know, we have, the law doesn't speak to that. It's quiet. So that means that you can. If there's an event going on and we have a camp right here and someone's walking by and they're armed and they're concealed and they're obeying every other part of the law, there's legal. There's nothing that they're doing illegal. This is another semi-prohibited area, and it's a little bit confusing, so we're going to talk about it in just a second. Weapons license holders are not allowed to carry in classes where high school students are enrolled through dual enrollment programs, not limited to move on when ready. It does not include classrooms where there are no high school students enrolled. So example, if we've got this classroom and there's no high school students in here, they're not enrolled, we're having this class, the gun can be in here. Areas that may be conducting camps, we just talked about that, are field trips at MGA. It doesn't include that. So again, if this was a classroom, as odd as it sounds, for a day camp, and someone walked in here with a weapon, they wouldn't be violating the law because there's not a dual enrollee high school student in there. Permit holders are responsible for checking to see if there are high school students enrolled in classes where they intend to carry the concealed weapon. With the ID, the permit holders may inquire as to whether high school students are enrolled, and these are the places they can do it. They can go to the registrar's office, and that's actually the preference because that's the one that's spoken in the law, the campus director's office, or the university police department. It is a responsibility, and I underline this for a reason, of the license holder to determine if they're legally able to carry the class. You see right here, I got this in big red letters: do not get trapped by taking the responsibility if asked. If you don't fall within this purview, don't put yourself out there on a limb and try to do so. You may want to direct them to one of these appropriate locations to inquire, but I would ask that you do not provide that information because this is a really, again, fluid situation where they actually have to inquire 4 times during the year because of things like drop ad. So, you could go and tell them, well, looks like you're good. There's no one in there, and maybe somebody got added to that class or got dropped. So I just don't want to see you get put into that situation. Please refer them to one of these 3 offices. Again, the registrar's office, the campus director's office, or the university police. You know, in the beginning, we had came up with a couple of different ways we were going to do this, but in the end, to try to keep someone from just running a mass list of who does or doesn't have high school students, we stepped back from that approach so that, you know, certain people potentially couldn't be targeted. We didn't want that type of issue. So if the person brings their schedule, they can inquire as to their classes, but they can't get just a general list of whoever has high school students in their classrooms. I didn't mention it before we got started, but we're not taking questions during the session because we're actually live streaming, and this will be recorded to a link that'll be viewed later on. So after this is over with and after we've cut off, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to stand by and answer them for you. And folks that are on the other side at our other campuses, I'm going to provide an email address and a phone number that you can give us your questions. All right, so back to places that are prohibited. Another mainstay, offices, faculty, staff, or administrative weapons license holders are not allowed to carry in offices. Faculty, staff, or administrative offices do include suites, but it does not include hallways or common areas adjacent to an office that are not part of the office or suite. So the hallway is permitted. Someone's walking down the hallway, that's permitted. They go out the door, no problem. They step into an office, an administrative area, now we got a problem. That would be one of the prohibited areas that they couldn't have it. And that includes anybody. That's faculty, staff, or student. Can't have it in these areas. Some of you say, well, this is kind of confusing and the mud's in the water. I agree. And this potentially could go back to session. We've had it in session the last 5 sessions. So it could go back for additional clarifications based on what the legislators feel if this works or not, or if they're getting any feedback. So, but for now, this is the law of the land. Some people get in arguments, and I'll give you an example. We had a chief call me, and they have a building and it says business office. So when the person walks up to the door and it says business office on the door, their contention is that that's where the office starts. Whereas others would contend that it doesn't start until I step into the foyer and I access one of the doors that takes me into that clerical area. So that's some of the things that are coming up. And I feel like some of this will be tried in courts. I just don't want us to be the campus that is the test case, but some of this is going to have to be clarified at some point, no doubt. Offices and rooms where disciplinary proceedings are held, that might be an office, it might be a classroom. So if this is normally a classroom and no one that's high school students registered, you could have it in here, but let's say for today, Michael Stewart's holding a disciplinary hearing in here, it would be off limits. So again, that's a fluid thing, but I would think that common sense would prevail when you think there's a disciplinary hearing of any kind, maybe human resources, could be anything, no weapons allowed in that area. One of the important things that we get a lot of questions about is how are we going to do anything? What are the police going to do, or how are we going to be protected? We want to assure you that we're just as concerned as you are about your safety and everyone else's safety out here. The things that we've done in the past, we are going to have to reevaluate and rethink how we do them and change the way we do business. In the past, if we got a call with a person with a gun, we might have handled it a little bit differently than now. So we're counting on our dispatchers to ask questions before the officer gets to the scene. You know, what type of weapon does the individual have? Is it a handgun? Okay, are they displaying the weapon? Are they threatening anyone with the weapon? Are they saying anything that's out of the way? Are they, you know, these are the things that are going to be really important when we get out to the officers. So we've already started the training with our dispatchers to get more thorough information. Give you an example, we get a call to a person with a gun. This happened one day on another campus. We get a call, a person with a gun. The officer's headed there, he's accelerating. Gets called back. They said, now the guy has the gun in the face of the other person. So, okay, now the officer's really, you know, trying to get there. Gets there, bunch of people running around the area. He can see the 2 individuals. He can see the hand extended. He can see what he thinks is the gun in the guy's face. Runs out there, his adrenaline's pumping, actually trips because he's starting to, you know, his adrenaline's kick in, your legs get heavy, he gets to it, and the guy's just arguing, he's got a phone. He's just pointing a phone at his face. So did the officer really know at the time he got the call whether it was a gun or a phone? No, he didn't know. But obviously when he got there, he had to react differently because it wasn't as dangerous of a situation as he had heard that it was. So definitely a different way of doing business. And for any police officer that's worked outside the mainstay, I know there's a lot of concern, well, how will you know who's the good guy and the bad guy? If you've worked outside of a campus, that's always been the question. When you come up on a call and somebody's got a gun, you have to determine if that's somebody carrying a weapon and trying to defend themselves, or someone who's got a weapon and they're using it against someone against their will. This kind of just goes along with what I just said. We want our officers to carefully evaluate each call. We've had a couple of questions about knives, and did the knives, other type weapons change? As you know, last year, stun devices are already approved. Chemical munitions like OC spray and CS gas and that stuff that you can buy and keep in your pocket, those have always been allowed, so nothing's changed on that level. The length of the knives has changed as far as what you can carry as a utility weapon, but it didn't get expanded into the classroom. So actually, that's something the law is, again, silent on. You can have the firearm, but you can't have the edged weapon, the knife. For the people who are linked in today, this is the phone number that I said I'd provide. So if you have any questions, you can call and you can ask for me, 471-2414. You can also email us directly at police@mga.edu, and I do get that email directly. We will try to respond in a timely manner. And if it's something that we don't have the answer to, we will confer with Francis Davis office legal counsel, and we'll make sure that we try to get you the right answer. We have a lot of hypotheticals, out there right now, so we can't say that we have the answer to everything, but working with USG Legal, we can get you an answer. And if you have a work area or station that you're like, how does the law apply to this, or we're not sure, give us a call. We'll be glad to come out and physically look at it and give you our opinion on it and tell you, what the law will be for that area. It's just going to have to be that way for certain places. We can't give you a blanket cover explanation with the way some of these buildings are designed. Also, if you want to read the full legislation as it was passed this year, we've got a link here. And next week, this presentation will be put up, as well as an attestation you can sign and turn in to the police department. You can do it by email. We want to keep track for HR, send them that information to make sure you got it. So if anybody missed it and they're asking you how they can do it, be watching for that email, because it'll come out with a link to this, as well as the form that you will need to sign to get credit for attending. Also, if you have additional questions about campus carry, there's a website we have at mga.edu/campus carry, and this is the latest, greatest information that we have as the law pertains to this subject. And as we get new information, we'll continually update that website. And so some of those hypotheticals that may come up, we can go in there and maybe clarify them and post them in there for you, and to answer some of those frequently asked questions. Okay, that concludes today's session. I appreciate everyone attending, and like I said, I'll be glad to stay afterwards for anybody who may have something that they would like to address with me personally. Thank you.